Hello and welcome to another edition of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. We're in the Beaver County Auto Studios as always, and you may notice, just me today, going solo. Alan Saunders, unfortunately, down with some sort of bug. Hope Alan's feeling better, getting some much needed rest, because as we know, he's always on the move, running around. But just me here today, but still a lot to talk about. And the first thing I want to touch on is the Pitt Panthers men's basketball team getting their first victory in 13 games, breaking a 13-game losing streak on Saturday against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, propelling them towards the ACC Tournament, which is this coming week, starting tomorrow, actually, in Charlotte. So want to talk a little bit about the game that transpired on Saturday and a little bit of a preview to see maybe the Panthers can make some noise in Charlotte this weekend, win a game or two, and maybe spoil someone else's hopes for March and get some momentum going into the offseason for a team that got a much-needed win on Saturday against the Fighting Irish. But first things first, it was senior day at the Peterson Event Center for the Panthers, and they honored Joe Mascaro, they honored Jared Wilson-Frame, they honored City Indier. Indier and Wilson-Frame, two guys that have played very important roles, as I think we all know, on this Pitt team this year, especially Wilson-Frame, been the second leading scorer for much of this season and been kind of the lone bright spot for this team outside of Xavier Johnson in conference play. Been shooting the lights out from beyond the arc and just been such a great veteran presence, I think, for this team. But honored him on senior day, and as I mentioned, they were trying to break a 13-game losing streak. They were able to do just that. Ended up getting the victory 56-53, and this is one of the first times, too, where this team was able to kind of grind out a win. And it wasn't pretty from either team. Both teams shot under 40%. I think Pitt shot under 35%, if I'm correct. But they were able to grind out a victory, get a tough one against an opponent that is also having a difficult year in Notre Dame. But they were able to do a lot of things well. I think the first thing was they were able to shut down John Mooney. John Mooney, an all-ACC caliber player. He's been arguably the best big man in the ACC this season. And they were able to stifle him, a guy with 13 double-doubles in ACC play this year, just too shy of the record that was set by Tim Duncan way back when, 20 years ago or so. So obviously John Mooney was having a great year. And the Panthers, and give all the credit to Kenny Chukwuka, a guy that really at times has fallen out of favor with Coach Stallings with regards to his playing time, out of the rotation. But he got the start on Saturday, and he did not disappoint. And he held John Mooney, a guy that averages about 18 and 11, held him to 4 points. He did get 13 rebounds in the end, but held him away from a double-double, which has really been, he gets a double-double against everyone, seemed like this season. And Kenny Chukwuka, with his hustle play, he was boxing out, he was doing a bunch of little things all over the floor, didn't really get it, you didn't really see his impact on the stat sheet. As you look at his line, 2 points, 6 rebounds, he did get a block in there, but he did a phenomenal job guarding John Mooney and really stifling him. And outside of that, Notre Dame was really not able to get anything going. He is their leading scorer. He's the guy that runs the show for them. They try to feed him down low in the low post. They try to get him some wide open catch and shoot threes to stretch the floor. He wasn't able to do that at all very well. I'm not even sure if he hit a three on Saturday. So really a great performance. Xavier Johnson was good as always. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but he did a nice job of holding on to the ball and taking care of it. Turnovers have really been his issue throughout the season, and especially over that 13-game losing streak. But he was able to just limit his turnovers to just 3. He had 6 assists in the game, 2 steals as well, and 10 points. Another double-figure scoring game for him. But I think the biggest thing for Pitt in this game and why they were able to get the W was the resurgence of Trey McGowan's. And Trey McGowan's has shown many bright spots this season. But he really hasn't had a great performance ever since that victory against Florida State earlier on in conference play. He had 30 points in that game, but since then, really hasn't had any success outside of a few good moments here and there over this conference schedule. But he finally came out, had a really solid performance, just 16 points for him, but he was able to get 2 assists, he got a block, 2 steals, shot 6 for 10 from the field as well, hit 2 threes, and had an absolute ridiculous, monstrous dunk on the previously mentioned John Mooney. And I have to say, it was violent, it was malicious, and he had a few opportunities to get that poster on a few guys early on in the season, wasn't able to finish, but it took them to game 31 of the season, and I mean that's going to be on some little Panther fans' wall soon because it was an absolute poster, and it was so bad, the dunk, that they had to take John Mooney out of the game after it. So a really great all-around performance for Trey McGowan's, and good for this team and for him that they were able to get this win to close out the season, or at least the regular season. Because I had worries, and I talked about this with Alan on previous shows, was worried that there was a sense of apathy that would creep into the offseason. If this team went on a 14-game losing streak to end the regular season, and presumably if they went into Charlotte, the ACC Tournament, and didn't win a game there, that's 15 straight games to end your season, and then all of that excitement you had through the first 15 games or so, after winning those first 2 conference games and a solid non-conference win-loss record, all of that excitement you had, I think, would have been very difficult to capitalize on in the recruiting, to get people back invested for next season. I feel like it would have been some negative emotions and feelings that would have trickled into the offseason. And I think it's not just for the win-loss record to get that third conference win. I think it's also important just for morale and for where this program is headed and where they're looking to take this program under Jeff Capel, is that they were able to get that win, that third conference win, to close out the season. So regardless of what happens in Charlotte in the ACC Tournament, they were able to get a victory on Senior Day, an emotional day at the Peterson Event Center in front of a decent crowd for what was spring break for the Pitt students, that they were able to get a win there to close out the year on a high note with some of their best players, their young players that they're going to be looking to even more next year, that they were able to have a good performance to close out the season. But I do think getting this victory, I think it gives them a better chance of maybe pulling off an upset and winning a game and moving on to Wednesday in the ACC Tournament that will kick off tomorrow in Charlotte. Pitt, in their first-round matchup, after everything shook out with regards to seeding in the ACC, Pitt comes in as the 14 seed, not finishing in last place, which is a win from last year, obviously, through the regular season. But they're going to face off the 11 seed Boston College in Game 3 tomorrow in Charlotte at 7 p.m. Now, this is a Boston College team, and the last time they faced off against Pitt, Boston College was victorious 66-57 in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. But this was in the midst of that Pitt losing streak, and a game that Pitt trailed in a lot of the time, had a really strong comeback in that second half, but eventually BC was able to pull away with that 9-point victory in the end. But Pitt did a lot of good things here, and Pitt has done a lot of good things throughout the season, especially in the conference play, just not able to get the victories. They weren't able to get the W's, and you have to play a full 40 minutes of basketball, as we know, as we always preach on this show in the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. But this is a team that I think Pitt can beat, a winnable game for them, and it was a winnable game for them back when they played in February on the 12th. And I think that if Pitt rolls into Charlotte with a 14-game losing streak, frankly, I would have given them no chance to win a game. Just, you saw the emotion in the players. You saw they looked tired. They looked worn out. And they looked like they were ready for the season to be over. But they came out and got that victory on Saturday night. And I think that this puts them in a position where they may still be feeling that maybe frustration with how the season over the last month and a half or so turned out. They may still have that. They may still just be worn out, like they looked for a large portion of that 13-game losing streak. But I think this still gives them some energy. This energizes them because they know, okay, we know we still belong. We've proved it to ourselves once again that we can win games in the ACC. And I think now that they got that victory over Notre Dame, albeit a beat-up, not Notre Dame team of old, I think this gives them a lot of confidence rolling into Charlotte. And I think what Jeff Capel's message is, which has to be, I think, the message from every coach in the country playing in a conference tournament over the last week and this coming week, is it's a new season. It's a 5-day season. You're hoping you can play for 5 days, and if you're in the ACC, you're hoping that if you're a team playing on Tuesday, you hope that somehow you're able to be playing on Saturday. And obviously, it's a tall task. It's been done before. For example, the UConn teams under Kemba Walker, but it's obviously very difficult. And I'm not saying Pitt's going to go on a run and end up playing Duke or somebody. That's not going to happen. But what I'm saying is, being re-energized, getting that victory, I think bodes well for this Pitt team against, I think, a very winnable game against Boston College. at 7 o'clock tomorrow. And I think Pitt can end up getting a victory in that game and end up playing on Wednesday, which would set up a second-round matchup against bitter rival Syracuse, the 6th seed in the tournament. But what does Pitt have to do in this game? I mean, there's things that Pitt does need to improve on from that first matchup with the Eagles from Boston College. In that game, Pitt shot 29% from the field. Certainly need to improve on that. 27% from three. And Pitt took 37 three-point shots. They took 27 in their last game, or 22 in their last game against Notre Dame. And I think that's what Pitt needs to do. They need to do a much better job of trying to get in the lane, drawing that contact. Pitt got absolutely, frankly, screwed by the officials in the game against Notre Dame. They had like 3 free throws going into the last 5 minutes of that game until Notre Dame had to start fouling. But they're not getting the calls they were early on in the season. That's been well documented, and Coach Capel has definitely let the fans and the media and the ACC all know that he's not happy with the way his young guards have been officiated. But if Pitt can do a better job of getting to the line in this game than they did against Boston College about a month ago now, I think they have a good chance of winning this game. Don't be relying on the three. Get to the line. And what it obviously all comes down to for Pitt is you have to shut down Kai Bowman. And we know how much the ACC loves Kai Bowman. Once again, an all-ACC selection this season. But Pitt did a pretty good job, I would say, on him in that game back in February. 14 points for him. He did have 7 assists and 8 rebounds, though. But they made him shoot 4 for 16 from the field. And this was all when ESPN decided, for some asinine reason, to have the Kai Bowman cam, where they're going to show a split screen and just track this player who doesn't even have the ball and was shooting 4 for 16 from the field. But no, we're going to highlight the guy who's having an off night instead of just showing the game how it should be shown. But we've already had that rant here on the Corner 3. But they need to do a similar job of the defensive performance they put on back in February on Kai Bowman. But that being said, you can't let other guys beat you. I mean, Jordan Chapman had 9. Jared Hamilton had 8. Jarius Hamilton had 11. Chris Herron Jr. had 9 for Boston College. So even though they did a relatively good job of shutting down Kai Bowman, they allowed the other guys to beat them. And if you're going to have this masterful defensive performance, you can't just forget about everyone else. And that was the main problem on February 12th against Boston College. And they're going to have to do a better job of that now. Now, I think this was the game where I first noticed that McGowan's, Tony, and Xavier Johnson all looked to be a little tired, worn down, and not physically, just mentally. So I think that you get that big victory on Saturday. You have 2 days off or so and a day of travel to get to Greensboro, playing the game at night. That's kind of like 3 days in there that you have to rest up and get your mind right. And like I said, it's a new season. It's a new opportunity for this Pitt team to kind of make their mark on the 2018-2019 campaign. You get a big victory in the ACC Tournament. No one's saying you got to go and win it, but you get a first-round win. You play Syracuse tough if you advance in the next game on Wednesday. And I think this 3-15 or whatever the record stands now in conference, I think looks a lot better if you can get a victory in the ACC Tournament. And I think this Pitt team has a better chance than any team over the last 3 years to do that because of the way they play, the coaching they have, and just the talent amongst these freshmen. So I think there's a very good chance for Pitt to get a victory on Tuesday, tomorrow at 7 o'clock from Charlotte. In the ACC Tournament, it's Boston College once again, and these are two teams that we kind of expected to be at the bottom of the scrap heap in the ACC, and that's exactly where they've ended up as the season is gone. But I think this is a very winnable game for Pitt. They just need to make sure they're getting to the line, getting in the paint, drawing contact, and not relying on the threes because they shot 37 of them last time, and that didn't work out when they played up there in Massachusetts. But as it's peak time for bracketology now in college basketball, and obviously all these conference tournaments are going down this week, I do want to talk about some of the teams that I think have a chance to be a Cinderella. And I'm not saying a Cinderella is going to be a 16 seed. I'm just saying a team that maybe hasn't been to the NCAA tournament in 10 years, or a team that is kind of still flying under the radar. This is any team that I think can kind of go on a run here and make some noise, bust some brackets, or, you know, if you're the betting man or woman or anyone, this could be maybe a team that can win some money down the road. So the one team that I do want to mention is the UCF Knights, not the Golden Knights. They'll get very angry at you if you call them the Golden Knights. They haven't been called that for 10 years or so. But the UCF Knights, third in the American, 23-7, and if you haven't heard of Taco Fall, then you must be living under a rock, because Taco Fall stands at like 7-6 or something ridiculous like that. Let me pull that up here to make sure I'm giving him credit where credit is due. Taco Fall, 7-6 Taco Fall from Dakar, Senegal. The senior, he's been kind of a phenom in college basketball over the last few years, but this UCF team has finally put a bunch of the pieces together, and they sit there 13-5 in conference, at third right now in the American. Absolutely going to be an NCAA tournament team, and they've had success in an American conference that has not had the same contenders, I think, as usual, but an American conference that has certainly been good nonetheless. I think that a lot of people would say it's been much better than the Pac-12 if we're going to separate Power 5 and Group of 5, use those football rules. They've certainly been better than the Pac-12. I think they've been the fourth best conference in college basketball this year. So they've played the likes of Houston, Cincinnati, Temple's up there, Memphis, but the traditional powers like UConn, Wichita State, not having those great seasons. So this has been an opportunity for UCF to have a good season. They've certainly capitalized on it. And it's not just Taco Fall, who I will say, at 7'6", 330 pounds, whatever he is, he's obviously a monster of a man. But he doesn't play the game like some lumbering giant like you would expect or see other very large players play like that. He's very mobile. He can bend, he can move, he can knock down a jump shot. I mean, he's a very talented player, and he's not just the lumbering giant that I think we've come to expect in those guys that are 7'2" plus that come around every so often. I mean, he's a very talented player. He blocks 2.4 shots per game. I mean, I think you would hope he does that at 7'6", but for UCF, it's not just him. It's the guards, Aubrey Dawkins, and BJ Taylor. Both guys averaging 16 and 15 points respectively on the season. UCF really goes where their two guards go. I mean, those guys have had fantastic years. Both shooting. Taylor is shooting 37% from three. Dawkins shooting just about 40%. They've had fantastic years, and I see UCF as a team that could really go on a run and maybe get to Sweet 16. I mean, if they get the right matchup, I think UCF can certainly be a team that can go on a run. The other team I want to touch on, a team that just recently, I believe it was on Saturday, qualified for the NCAA tournament, got that automatic bid, and that is John Morant and Murray State. And they come out of, I believe it is the Ohio Valley Conference. Yes. So John Morant and Murray State get in. John Morant, the guy that I feel like everyone's talked about, but not enough people have seen. If you haven't seen John Morant play, you certainly need to look up some of his highlights this season. He's been absolutely fantastic. He is a top 4 NBA prospect. He's up there with the Zion Williamsons, the RJ Barretts, the Cam Reddishes. I mean, he is that good, but doesn't get the same kind of notoriety because obviously he's not playing at Duke. He's playing at Murray State, but he has been, yes, Ohio Valley champions, Murray State, 27-4. He's been fantastic all year. He really, if I had to make a player comparison, I feel like everyone's been saying Russell Westbrook. That's probably the best comparison for him. He's athletic. He's a slasher. He has great handles. He can get to any spot on the floor he wants to. Needs to improve on his jump shot when he gets to the NBA level. Right now, he's one of the best players in the country. And as we all know, when it gets to March, if you have one of the top players in the entire nation, a player playing out of their mind at the perfect time, you can make some magic. You can get to the Sweet 16. You can even get to the Final Four. You can win the whole thing if you have a guy like Kemba Walker. John Morant is one of those talents. I mean, he is that good. And you're going to be hard-pressed to find a team that's going to be able to shut him down. Is one of those guys who's probably a one-man show for him, for Murray State, but they're a very good defensive team. They completely shut down their opponent in the Ohio Valley championship game. So they are a talented team and a team that can defend in March, that has one of those transcendent talents in John Morant in terms of the college game. I mean, that is a recipe for success when it comes to March. And those are two individual things you would like to check off on a team. They have both. So those are two of those attributes that you want in a Cinderella candidate, and they have both. They have a fantastic individual player that can drop 30 points if you need them to, and they play great defense. So if they run into a team that relies on the three-point shot, that isn't great defensively either, they can shut them down and create some magic in March. Some other teams, it's still a little difficult to predict who is going to be in, as some of these conference championship tournaments have not finalized yet. But Murray State is one, obviously. And as we look at some of the other teams, the Utah State Aggies are one as well. They're a team coming out of the Mountain West. They've had some battles with Nevada this year. Nevada, as we know, has been fantastic all season. Utah State is certainly a team that could go on a run here. If they're able to get in, they probably are going to be a 12 seed if they're able to get into the field. But St. John, led by Chris Mullen, they can get in as 12 seed, and that's always that popular 12-5 upset if they were able to get into the field and get that seed. They could have an upset there. They're a talented team. VCU is another one. I mean, VCU, we know what they've done in the past. Obviously, Shaka Smart no longer there. The coach at Texas, and we're not sure how long that's going to last. But VCU still a great defensive team coming out of the A-10, the best team in the A-10 in a league that we're not sure how many bids they're still going to get. It kind of all depends on how that conference tournament shakes out from Brooklyn this coming week. But VCU is a team that is great defensively, that always has that knack for upsets in March, that has that resume, that history of knowing how to win, 2 games in 3 days and getting on to the next weekend and advancing, survive in advance. VCU certainly a team that has that pedigree. And another team, and this is probably the only option for the Pac-12 to have any success because they've been so awful as a conference this year, but that's Washington. Washington has had a very quiet year, but a very successful year. 24-7, 15-3 in the Pac-12, so they took care of business overall in a pretty lackluster league. But led by senior David Crisp, who's had a really strong year, and he's a phenomenal wing defender, one of the best in the country. So Washington's a team that I think will come in, hopefully for their sake, they can win their conference tournament. And they're a team that if they come in hot, that they have the offensive stars with Jalen Nowell and Noah Dickerson that can both score at the ball relatively high rate. And they have that good defender in David Crisp. They have that upperclassman experience as well, which is what you want when it comes to March. So Washington, hopefully a team for their sake that can get some wins in their conference tournament, get rolling here over this next week. And, I mean, they're a team that I think is going to have a lot to prove, not only for themselves, but for their conference, because they're likely going to be the only team that comes out of the Pac-12. I mean, there may be another one here and there. I think Arizona State under Bobby Hurley can probably get in, but I think they're still kind of on that bubble area. But they're going to have a lot to prove because everyone's been talking smack about the Pac-12 and how bad it's been all year, not only for themselves, but they're going to want to make some noise in March for their conference also. But before we wrap things up here for this edition of the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live, I do want to touch on something that I saw that happened over the weekend. And this has to do with, I think, everyone's least favorite NBA owner, and that is James Dolan, owner of the New York Knicks, and had a little bit of an incident over the weekend. This is basically, he was walking down the tunnel, leaving Madison Square Garden. I don't know if it was at the half or after the game, but a fan yelled to him from the stands and said, sell the team or something like that, or along those lines, basically telling him that they dislike him, which I think we kind of all know that all Knicks fans don't like James Dolan very much. But a fan yelled to him, said, sell the team, we don't want you, or something along those lines. And he decided to kick this fan out of the game and ban him from Madison Square Garden or something ridiculous like that. If you're James Dolan, you need to have thicker skin. And not only because you're the owner of an NBA franchise, but because you're a bad owner of an NBA franchise who consistently fields an underachieving product on the court that is doing a disservice to one of the best basketball markets, best basketball cities, and best basketball fan bases, frankly, in the entire country, in the entire world, in New York City. And year after year, James Dolan makes these stupid coaching hires, even though I like Fizdale, bad decisions in the draft. They miss on key free agents, even though everyone seems to think that everyone wants to play in New York when really that doesn't matter. No one cares where they play as long as they win and they're with their friends in the NBA nowadays. And bring in free agents and giving bad contracts to free agents, a la Tim Hardaway Jr., Courtney Lee, who they ended up trading anyways, trading away Kristaps Porzingis, who's now going to be some super tandem in Dallas with Luka Doncic. The list goes on and on. Also, the whole incident with Charles Oakley, but, that's another story for another day. Regardless, James Dolan has done a significant disservice to New York City, to New York Knicks fans in his time as the owner. And you know what? If you're getting roasted by a fan walking off the floor telling you to sell the team, you know what? You probably should sell the team because clearly you're not as invested as they are. Clearly you don't care. You're just in it for making the money, and it's the owners that really are passionate about their fan base, passionate about the city that they're in, and passionate about providing winning basketball for their fan base. Those are the owners that everyone likes. And if you're not going to make that a priority to give winning basketball to the fans of New York, then you know what? You should sell the team. But to be completely honest, you need to have thicker skin than that. People yelling from the stands telling you to sell the team, as right as they probably are and valid their opinions are, you can't let some fan in the stands affect you like that. And you certainly can't kick the guy out of Madison Square Garden and ban him from going to future Knicks games because you got your feelings hurt. Okay? I don't know how much money you're worth, but I think you can get over it. And if you can deal with the criticism, maybe you should sell the team because clearly it's not working for you. Clearly you can't handle it. And we know it's New York where the lights are the brightest. And if you can't take the heat, James Dolan, maybe it is time for you to sell the team. But it's ridiculous that you're going to kick out a fan who makes a valid criticism of you because your skin is not thick enough and you're still consistently putting out a poor product on the court in New York, doing a disservice to the fans of the Knicks, doing a disservice to the entire NBA. And yeah, you need to be tougher than that. Sorry, James Dolan. I've never been a fan of you. Probably less of a fan of you now. But toughen up. What are we doing? It's New York City, right? But that's going to do it for this edition of the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, want to make sure you subscribe. Helps us out a lot. Lets us keep the lights on in this place. Keeps all of our great things we're doing here going. And as well, make sure you follow us on Twitter also. Follow me on Twitter, Cale_Berger. But once again, thank you for tuning in. This edition of the Corner 3 from the Beaver County Auto Studios, as always, on Pittsburgh Sports Live.